begin with, let's talk a little bit about anxiety in dogs and how this can start from the very beginning of a dog's life.
You've hit the crux of the problem right there. It doesn't start in early puppyhood. See, everyone looks at their puppy. The owners, they think, yeah, he's confident and friendly. They often complain he's overconfident and over-friendly. He goes to the vets and they just see a wriggly pup and they don't notice anything's wrong. That anxiety and fears are really adolescent onset problems in all animals, humans included. And so the youngster looks perfectly confident and even unruly, rambunctious, rumbustious, no impulse control. And then it suddenly creeps up on you, the absence of neonatal, early puppy socialization, handling, which enables the youngster to develop social savvy with his other puppies in the litter, and then other dogs at home, and then the people. It just doesn't happen. Now, we have fear period in the title, and that's why I decided to do this talk, because it simply doesn't exist. You can't look at development that way. Like, I don't know whether you remember the old Dr. Spock book of baby rearing. We don't have babies pop out their teeth on cue or to crawl at the same time or walk at the same time. They vary tremendously. A little kid who lives locally here, everyone was worried about him. He wasn't talking when he was young. But to me, I looked at him, he understood language, he was responding to it. And then all of a sudden, it came out. He was suddenly totally fluent in English. He just wasn't talking yet. So development is a gradual, ongoing, progressive process, and we can't really divide it into stages even, unless the stages make sense, if they have an absolute beginning and end. So from the standards of the Scott and Fuller's stages of development, I then developed those into my own, and we have some obvious transitions. We have fetus, and then we have neonate. Like you're inside, then you're outside.
Yep.
So I talk about the environment in the uterus and then the environment of the neonate. Then all of a sudden, within 4 or 5 days, ears and eyes open, and we change from neonate to puppy. Now, puppyhood to me, between up to adolescence, the transition is fairly abrupt at 18 weeks. But not as abrupt as leaving the breeding kennel and going to the new home. So when I talk about phases of development, I say inside the uterus, as a neonate, as a young puppy in the kennel, the first month at home, the next two months at home, then adolescence. But adolescence is a very prolonged and protracted period of about 18 months in small breed dogs, but 2 years easily in a dog like a Rottie or something. He's an adolescent till he's 3 years old. And then gradually he develops his grown-upness, if you like. So when we talk about something like a fear period, it's sheer idiocy. And there's absolutely no scientific evidence to back this up at all. So to now summarize the answer to your question, anxiety in young puppies, it's very rare. Young puppies have a universal sort of hardwiring to approach anything and everything. They have bags of confidence and they do the stupidest stuff, like walk off a platform and drop 5 feet or stick their nose in a candle flame. And then they don't do it again, but they will approach anything, including people. Now, as they get older, that tendency to approach everything, all unfamiliar stimuli, decreases with age. On the other hand, a tendency to avoid anything new increases with age. So these two processes are going on throughout the dog's life, even into the sunset years, that I find myself the last 10 years really scared doing some of the most ridiculous things. Like I'll tell you one. It's if you have to press buttons on a machine and a big line of people are waiting for you behind, like at a toll plaza, I totally panic. I'm not good with buttons. And the fact that I'm keeping people waiting, well, that's only been a recent fear or anxiety, but it's a very real one. And it makes me sort of think back to stuff I used to do when I was a youngster and then a teenager. I thought I did such daft, crazy, brave things. I mean, I was driving all over Africa when I was 17, 18, and 19, north, south, east, and west. Well, I don't want to lose a place, leave a place where there's good restaurants and a good hospital nearby within like 1 hour's drive. And so the universal approaching decreases, the universal avoidance of unfamiliar things increases. So, what do we have to do? It's obvious. In the early time window, the first 3 weeks of life, the first 3 months of life, we have to expose our puppy to anything and everything it could possibly meet as an adolescent or an adult. So, it's no longer the unfamiliar. So now, you're out and a child runs up, steps on a skateboard, trips up, falls down and screams. Puppy said, did that. Yeah, in the puppy party at home. They invited kids and toys. So now nothing is scary. So it's the two things. It's universal increase in avoidance of the unfamiliar, decrease in the confidence to approach the fact that it remains hidden from everyone concerned, the breeder, the owner, the vet, until it's too late. And now the treatment's the same, it's just that it takes much longer and it's nowhere nearly as effective.
That's really interesting. And I suppose it makes me think about chaotic biological systems and how, you get a phase change that suddenly everything seems really different, but it's not. It's been building and building and building, and then one little thing tips the whole system into a new thing, and that might be why people have made up this idea of fear periods, because you've had a dog that seems to be totally fine, and then suddenly it's fearful of everything, but it hasn't. It's just a change in the continuum that's really obvious, yeah?
You're absolutely right. The precipitous onset, as perceived by the owner, is because they've suddenly realized they've been living this for ages. So let's say first night in puppy class, we've got a bunch of 12-week-old puppies. I look around, say the dozen puppies there, and I think, right, these 5 dogs are going to bite people when they're adults. These 3 are going to bite family members, probably the dad or the little boy, because they're already slow to approach. One of them's even backing off the father in the family now, ducking his head and backing away. But people don't see that. Once the situation that's developing, the anxiety, the fear, if you like, reaches a certain threshold or criterion, then the owner goes, oh, at that point, they become different owners. They react totally differently towards their dog with fear and worry when it greets another dog. Well, the dog senses this. Whoops. Yep. So it accelerates everything. So the onset appears precipitous to a layperson. And there I would include a lot of veterinarians, present company accepted, because behavior wasn't a big part of the syllabus. And to me, it's everything. Like in the large animal world, it's first restrain your large animal. So you can castrate him or dehorn him or shear the sheep. In the exotic world, a good friend of mine, Oliver Graham Jones, was probably one of the first exotic vets in the world. And he wrote a book called First Catch Your Tiger. And the whole book was about treating the elephant was simple. It was actually just one incision over the tusk that's not coming through and got infected. But getting the elephant, it required a crane, 2 workers on the crane outside of the zoo, him directing the crane. But the actual surgery was whoosh. And so, handleability of animals is everything, because it's the biggest time waster, even in a small animal practice. If you have an intractable cat, hello, thank goodness it's only 10 to 20 pounds. Imagine if it were the size of dog breeds. I mean, we wouldn't live, would we? As vets, we'd all be dying young.
Well, another thing that I think about as a veterinarian and in general with animals is if people have got a big dog they take a lot more care with this than if they have a small dog, because they, you know, if you've got a Rottie, if it bites you, that's serious business. You've got a Chihuahua and they nip you, it's not nearly as serious. Well, some Chihuahuas can be, but you know, I think that's another thing. I grew up on a cattle property working with horses and things like that. So one of the things that I really focus on with people is you've got to be able to touch your puppy all over. Really, really important from the earliest possible age, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and the difference between horses and say puppies and cats, their socialization is very, very different. So equity, all ungulates, you know, horses, cows, pigs, sheep, everything. Um, when they come out, they are up and running within 24 hours. They have to be, otherwise they will be a meal for some predator. And so they are very precocious in terms of their development. So to make a horse or a cow handleable, it's the first 24 hours. And the work of Bill Miller or Bob Miller. Now, I was at college with Bill Miller, veterinarian. So Bob Miller was the vet who looked at socializing young horses. And what he would do is within the first 24 hours, he would handle every part of their body, you know, stethoscope, pick up the hooves, tapping on them with a hand and a hammer and things like this, flagging them with a white sheet, dropping buckets, clapping his hands. And then when he'd come back and the stallion were a yearling, he'd say, come here. It would approach him and he could handle it. Well, the good news, bad news. The good news is it only takes you one day to do it. The bad news is everyone misses it.
Gotcha.
With altrical animals, though, like cats, dogs, and the ultimate altrical beast being humans, I mean, I always joke that the human male doesn't mature till he's 70 years old.
Could you explain the word altrical? Because I've never heard of it.
The opposite of precocious. So precocious means you develop very quickly.
Gotcha.
Altrical means you take a long time. You need a lot of care from mum.
Gotcha. Okay, that's cool.
And then you still haven't got it. Even when you stop suckling, you've still got an awful lot to learn to be socially mature and confident as an adult animal. So the good news and bad news for that is, well, it takes a long time. Okay. It does mean, though, at 8 weeks, when people get puppies, even if it's only been handled by two people, the breeder and her friend, and it hasn't heard a balloon burst or a gunshot or children screaming at the top of their lung, you can still catch up surprisingly quickly at 8 weeks. Now, to give you the timeline there, I would say within a week, you will have caught up. On the other hand, it's first night in puppy class at 12 weeks. That could take a couple of weeks to resolve. At 5 months, that's going to take several months to resolve. At 8 months, it's going to take several years. So
wow.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
And so really sobering. And I hope everyone listening is really taking careful attention to listen to this, because I know since COVID struck, the increase in unhandleable, extremely anxious dogs that we are calling COVID puppies in the clinic now is off the charts.
Yeah. You know, 1 week after the shutdown here in California, it was at March the 13th. 1 week later, I did my first COVID Zoom, and we told every vet in California about it, every vet clinic. They're all on our mailing list. And then we put it out, and, you know, we have massive lists of like 100,000, you know, people. And I said, here's what's going to happen. You're not going to know what's happening because your puppy will seem normal at home. But home won't change for a long time. And the first time visitors come to your house, you're going to see a sudden change in your puppy. They'll be backing off, snarling, growling, snapping, hiding. And sure enough, you know, and we subsequently did a COVID puppy Zoom about every 3 months, because, you know, they watch one and then on Facebook, it then gets buried, you know. It's only has a very short life, you know, half-life, like a couple of minutes, and it's forgotten. So we kept putting them out, but we're still getting it.